Hi, I'm Dr. Boyce Watkins from Your Black World, and you have seen all the craziness and the drama that has transpired in the United States, all across the country, protests everywhere, people finally confronting this very serious police brutality, police terror, mass incarceration problem that exists in America. As you can imagine, I am elated because you know that I've consistently tried to do my part in speaking on what's going on with police. Terror and mass incarceration, racial profiling. One thing that has to happen now is we really want to sort of contextualize all of this and try to understand, how do you take this energy, translate that into long-term meaningful progress? How does this convert into political energy that will lead to changes in laws and procedures that will keep people safe? And my go-to guy on political science, the guy that I just respect as, in my opinion, the foremost authority in this area in the country. For me, is Dr. Wilmer Leon, and I want to first ask Dr. Leon, how you doing today, brother?
I am doing well. I am doing well. And you?
Oh, I'm doing great, man. I'm
Good,
doing great, and
good.
I know it sounds like I end up just kind of gloating over how great you are and the great work you do, but I think that your work is important. In fact, I think
Thank you.
it's really emotion coming out because I always tell people that you're the piece of what I have left of Dr. Ron Walters, the great man that he was. And I still remember the conversation I had with Dr. Walters. It's funny, I didn't even talk to him that many times, but
Hmm.
when we did talk, it was meaningful and it stayed with me. So when he left, part of me was gone, and I see you as that connection. You worked with him, you know him pretty well, right?
Yes, I did. Yes, I did. I went to Howard to study under him and was blessed enough to be able to do so.
Yeah, so that's probably why when if people think that I kind of get overzealous in terms of talking about how great you are, that's part of the reason why, and also the fact that you bring your knowledge to the people, which I respect. Now, getting to the
Well,
point.
let
Okay,
me just
sure.
let me just quickly say that I would be incredibly remiss if I did not say I am merely part of a lineage of his that he has been able to leave behind. So you've got to look at people like Dr. Robert Smith. You've got to look at Dr. Artemisia Stanberry, Dr. Pearl Ford, Sekou Franklin. There's a number of Dr. Mac Jones, Joe McCormick. There's a number of people, and I'm merely just one who has been able to hang out with a very, very, very incredible group of great minds.
Absolutely, and I'm glad you brought that up. I appreciate that. I do know Dr. Stanberry, and she's, in fact, at some point we should talk about, her case with Rodney Stanberry. I
Hmm.
think that'll be
Hmm.
interesting.
Okay.
Okay, so I guess back to the point at hand in terms of what's going on in in the country right now. First of all, can you put this into context? What we're seeing right now. I mean, in Chicago where I live, we people blocked Lakeshore Drive,
Hmm.
the biggest highway in the city. You see this happening in big towns, small towns, Lexington, Kentucky, little podunk college town. Even they were blocking major highways. You see what's going on in D.C., New York, L.A. What can we compare this to? I mean, I was tempted to say, gosh, I don't know if we've seen anything like this since the '60s, but maybe I'm wrong. I mean, what do I compare this to in terms of this kind of political energy and unified action?
I think you're right. The civil rights movement slash the Vietnam War, opposition to the Vietnam War. Um, I would say that uh, maybe the Occupy movement, but I haven't seen uh, maybe the Occupy movement. I think would be another good example, but I'm sure that we could see some differences between the Occupy movement and what we're seeing in response to these extrajudicial killings by police officers.
Interesting. Okay, so um, in terms of what we're up against, you first of all you have this racial divide. You have whites who see, not all whites, the
Mm-hmm.
majority of whites who see things one way. People of color, as well as those who've had certain experiences with the police, they see things another way. Do you see our country becoming increasingly divided over this kind of thing? I mean, is this division necessarily healthy for our country?
I think it can be healthy if the protests are sustained and if over time more people start to understand that, as the Kerner Commission report said back in 1969, this is becoming and has become a country black and white, separate and unequal. And your point about this really comes down to personal experience. And there are so many. I was watching one of the talking head shows this morning. I think it was Face the Nation. And I don't remember who the individual was, but was talking about there are so many white people that just don't get this because, as Richard Pryor talked about in one of his bits a long time ago, they see the police as Officer Timpson. The police are the people that live next door to them. They're the people that they see in the grocery store every day and are friendly and working on their behalf and go to school with their children. And what too many people in Ferguson and other cities are seeing around the country is they're being policed by people who are outside of their communities, who look nothing like them, share nothing of their experiences, and instead of seeing them as people to protect and serve, they perceive them as suspects. They perceive them as enemy combatants who are to be eliminated. And that those two perceptions are real, and more people in this country have to understand that what a lot of people in the streets are protesting against is their reality.
Interesting. I mean, when you said that term enemy combatant, it really led me down a stream of thought where, I was thinking about how many black and brown communities can almost feel like these occupied territories,
Mm-hmm.
where you've got these soldiers, like similar to Iraq, kind of in that area, in that community, looking for enemy combatants. Right? It's not like they assume that every citizen in Iraq is an enemy combatant, but they know they in their mind they're sort of thinking every person could be, right? So
Mm-hmm.
it seems that it can affect how you treat every citizen that you bump into, because you're maybe as an officer or as a soldier, you're afraid of what might happen. You think about Vietnam, for example, when the little kids would come up and offer you candy and the child's carrying a bomb, and I think about that. So in a way, it is interesting that you really can sort of see many of our communities, as being these occupied states. So then people come in and they say, well, why don't we get more cops who are of color or more cops who are from those communities? But how do you do that when when you've got this increasing sentiment of disdain and just unconditional hatred for the police? Why would I, as a black kid from the hood, ever want to be a cop if everybody around me has told me that cops are evil, cops are horrible? How do you solve that dilemma, you think?
Well, I think that there are a couple of things here. One is, since September 11th, there has been a mind shift in this country with the quote unquote war on terror. The United States against the world. There are terrorists under every rock trying to blow up every airplane and blow up every building, and that mentality in terms of U.S. foreign policy is now becoming domestic policy, as we see the militarization of our police forces. And so I think that contributes to this issue. We have soldiers who are returning from tours in Iraq and from tours in Afghanistan, and they are moving into our police forces. And many of them are bringing the mentality that you just talked about. They're bringing that mentality from the battlefield onto the streets of urban America. Now, and then to your point about why would, getting more African Americans into police forces is one element, but that doesn't, I think, address the bigger problem of a psyche or psychosis within the department. When you start to talk to police officers, many of them will tell you this is the way they're trained. This is the mentality of the structure, the hierarchy within the police force. So just bringing more African Americans into the force, that is a good thing, but that's not going to solve your problem. And the other thing about how do you get more urban kids to be to join police forces when people in their community are railing against the police? That's true. And then the other thing is, a lot of those kids don't see positive images of black officers that they want to emulate. I know your father, I believe, was a cop. So you have a different, and I have family members. My dad was a parole officer. I have cousins who were police officers. My interaction with them, my dialogue with them, my ability to get insight from them impacts my perception of policing overall, as your interaction with your own father impacts your perception of policing. So there are a number of and one more point that I'd like to make, as you know, as we look at, I think a lot of this has to do with imagery, and it is the imagery that has been of African American people that has been portrayed and projected into the psyche of this country since we've been here since 1619. And so you have what Dr. Francis Cress Welsing talks about, the patterns of perception, the patterns of logic and symbol formation that white people form in their minds about black people, especially a lot of white people who in their communities do not interact with us on a daily basis. So I say this is not a matter of more training. This is a matter of psychotherapy. And this is not a matter of body cameras. This is a matter of psychoanalysis. Americans have to come to grips with the fact that America has been a racist country since, again, the colonists came here and brought us on that first Dutch man of war that anchored off the shores of Jamestown, Virginia in 1619. And so when you look at the records in terms of lynching back from 1882, and you look at the formulation of the Ku Klux Klan, and you look at the country putting smallpox vaccines in the blankets of Indians. I mean, this is what the country has been about. So what got me to this point, and then I'll shut up. What got me to this point was listening to someone on CNN ask the question, how did America get here? We've been here all along. It has manifested itself in different ways over time, but the fundamental premises of bigotry and racial hatred are ingrained in the psyche of who America is and who America always has been.
Wow, wow, we've always been here. I think that's a great point that you just made. In fact, I told someone the other day. I said, someone asked me, Dr. Watkins, what do you think about all this increase in police killings of black men, and this increase in police brutality? And I said, no, it's always been going on. It's just that the media never really told you about it.
Exactly.
And now we have things like social media. We have these camera phones that allow us to see these things, on a regular basis, and it's shocking people. But I mean, you could go back, 10, 20, 30, 40 years in any decade, and there were always, particularly African American men, who talked about their fear of the police because they knew what a cop would do to you, and they knew that no one would believe you because you were a black man. Not because you were a criminal. You don't even have to be a criminal. Just being a black man would imply criminality, or at the very least, you're not going to be trusted as much as this upstanding police officer. And it's unfortunate because in some cities, we've gotten to the point, and we still are at the point where some police forces operate like gangs. They're just the most powerful gang in the city, and they run around and they rob drug dealers and murder, do hits on people. In fact, in New Orleans at one point, this is just one example, the cops were giving police escorts to major drug dealers coming into the city. So think about this: the war on drugs, 1980s. Colombians, wealthy people, whatever, bringing billions of dollars of drugs into the city. The police are giving them an escort so they can deliver these drugs to black communities, but they're still making hundreds of drug arrests every week. Who are they locking up? They're not locking up the billionaire who just dropped
Right.
off all the drugs. They're locking up that black kid on the corner. They're taking away somebody's husband or father or whatever, and they're making money the whole time. They're getting
They're
money.
taking their cut off the top.
Exactly. They're getting money from the dealers. They're getting money from the numbers of arrests. They're getting money from court appearances. And so ultimately, that led to this insane commodification of black people, and this, and also just this consistent threat that has come from police. Now, I want to get into this great article that you wrote. You
Oh,
put it on
thank you.
your Black World now, and everything. Just so people know, everything that Dr. Leon writes is great. I think you should check it out. And what I like about Dr. Leon's advice is that he is a political science expert who just gives you the facts. He gives you information and perspective. He's not going to give you the liberal point of view or the conservative point of view. He's just going to give you knowledge, period. And then at that point, it's up to you to sort through that knowledge, and that's what I appreciate. Now, the article I want to say the title was "We have to look forward. We have to look back to move forward," or
Hmm.
something similar,
Yes.
something to that
Yeah.
effect. Tell
That's
me,
it.
tell me about that piece and why. What drove you to write it?
Well, again, it was hearing someone on CNN ask the question, how has America gotten to this point? And I'm screaming at the TV, we've always been here. And so that got me to thinking, you hear me, I say to you all the time that one of the big mistakes that we tend to make is we think that things happen in a vacuum. And one of the things that I try to do with the pieces that I write is connect dots through historical example. And so my title was "We have to look back in order to move forward," meaning we have to look back at the history of this country. If we are going to break this bigoted, controlling element of our nationalist psyche, we've got to look back and understand that this has been the way America has been thinking since America was America, and even before then, when we were just 13 colonies. And so, for example, when you look at the Constitution and you understand the fugitive slave provision was put into the Constitution so that if a slave escaped from the South and went to the North, slave catchers, a la today's police force, would had the right to go into the free state, capture, kidnap that runaway individual, and return them back to the person that they ran away from. That's a perfect example of how, throughout our history in this country, we have always had to fear the police, because in too many communities, the police has not been on our side. So what I wanted to do, and I opened the piece with President Obama, I'm sorry, Senator Obama gave a speech back in 2004 where he said, "There's not a Black America and a white America. There's not a Asian America and a Latino America. There's the United States of America." And what I wanted to show was, again, what he said in 2004 was wrong if you understood what the Kerner Commission said in 1968, that we're becoming a nation of a white and Black America, separate and unequal. And so what we're finding with the inability to get indictments of police officers who shoot unarmed Black African American men, who choke to death African American men, when we can't get indictments of those individuals, that's a signal that what has been ongoing in this country since its inception is continuing to this day.
Interesting, and we know what's here. Here's what I will throw out there. I agree with everything you said. You and I have been talking for years, and we're on the same page on a lot of these issues. And I learned so much from you. One realization I had this week was as I watched the protests and I saw the images and the faces of all the people who were shutting down freeways and disrupting Black Friday shopping and all these other things. I was actually touched that despite the flaws of our country, despite the mental illness of racism that you described earlier, um, there are people out here of all ethnic backgrounds that want to do the right thing. You know,
Hmm.
there were so many white people out there that were, putting their lives on the line who were just sick of this stuff. And it touched me because I said, they're doing this for a black man. They're not doing this for some wealthy, beautiful black woman,
Hmm.
educated black, right? They're doing this uh, for Eric Garner, who actually reminds me a lot of my late older brother who was killed. He was not he wasn't killed by police, but he was in and out of prison, or so Eric wasn't in and out of prison, but he did go to jail a few times. He was homeless. Eric wasn't homeless, but my uncle, he would have a place to live. He was my uncle and my older brother. That's why I go back and forth. Um, he was big. He was a big black man. And even though he was a criminal, he was a likable kind of person.
Hmm.
People that knew him, they'd see him with a smile on his face, and they'd always be happy to see him. He was always willing to help. So he wasn't quite the man he wanted to be, but he wasn't a bad man. He wasn't going to pull out a gun and rob you, but he might sell some loose cigarettes,
Hmm.
if that's what he had to do to make some money. And so, you know, one of the things I think that he got accustomed to believing about himself was that he had no value to society, that he was just
Okay.
one of the forgotten people. And I think so many black men feel this way. They
Hmm.
feel just marginalized. They feel that people either fear them or they just sort of throw them out there and don't care what happens to them. Black man dies, it's no big deal. And so the idea that this man's death could mobilize so many millions of people, in a unified effort like this was really touching. And I think it says that as sick as our country still is, there are people that are working to heal. So we have to give them credit for that. Also, across the board, even former President Bush, his little statement, the grand jury's decision was hard to understand.
Hmm.
You know, for all of Bush's flaws, God bless him for that. I mean, I really don't think that a former American president, especially a former Republican American president, would have said that 20 years ago. Right? So that tells me that maybe there's some hope. Maybe it probably won't happen in our generation or our kids or our grandkids' generation, but because it's a big problem, it's a big mess to clean up. You spent
Hmm.
400 years creating this; it's going to take a while to clean it up. Um,
Hmm.
but in terms of concrete political action that can occur both in the White House and in Congress and the Senate, as it surrounds at least trying to confront this issue. What are some things that you think? I guess I'll ask that question in two quick layers. One, what do you think the White House is thinking right now as they're watching America really mobilize in ways that they haven't really seen anywhere else? Like what forces are they kind of trying to balance, right, between the police, supporting the police versus dealing with the citizens? So what do you think that they're thinking, and what do you think that they can actually do to begin to kind of address this issue, and not just the White House, but our elected officials in general?
Well, a very dear friend of mine and one of my former instructors, Dr. Joseph McCormick, says that President Obama is caught again in what he calls an inclusionary dilemma. And this inclusionary dilemma is that he's caught in his own perception of not being the first African American president, but not wanting to be tagged as working just on behalf of black people. And so, in my opinion, this puts them in somewhat of a case of analysis paralysis, because they're almost afraid of their own shadows, and so they don't know how to come out and forcefully speak to the realities that are right in their face without this other narrative coming up behind them, I've always said, if you understand what the contradictory narrative is going to be, diffuse it before it's said. So come out and say, this is horrific. This has to stop. Give the statistics on the number of African American men unarmed that are being killed by the police. And then in your next paragraph say, now let me tell you what the conservatives are now going to say to this. And diffuse it before it is said. I don't understand how they can just be so passive on something that is so obvious and cuts to the core of not only Black America, but this cuts to the whole core of who America is supposed to be. And that's why I closed my piece with part of the poem, Let America Be America Again, from Langston Hughes, because I wanted to show that this has been an ongoing problem. And I also wanted to demonstrate this isn't Wilmer Leon talking. Great minds like Langston Hughes have been speaking to this for decades. So that's the first, I think that's the first answer. And then in turn, I think you wanted to go to what are some of the tangible things that can be done?
Yeah, what do you think politically that can happen here,
Well,
or has to happen as well?
when the dust settles in Ferguson, if that mayor in the next election is reelected, then that tells me that the people of Ferguson don't understand. If that police chief is still the police chief, if that governor is still governor, if he does not face a serious threat in Missouri politically, not to say that he could be removed from office in the next election, but there has to be a viable, serious challenge if people want to start to bring about change. There, to me, has to be a three-pronged approach, as was used in the civil rights movement. The streets, the courts, the legislature. And so the way they're in the streets, and that's great. But my question, and this is not saying that it's not happening, this is a question to them. What is your protest in the street tied to in the longer term? If you're just out in the street burning down grocery stores in your own neighborhood, then tomorrow morning when you go to get the milk for your Cocoa Puffs and you don't have any, you're going to have no place to go to get it. So what is the long-term objective of this protest in the street? If it is not tied to serious structural demands upon the system that are clearly articulated and that can be implemented through the legal process or through the judicial process or through the electoral process, then I don't know what you're doing.
Well, and I think out of fairness to everyone that's protesting on this, I think it is important to always, to clarify that when you talk about people burning down grocery stores, you're not talking about the majority of
No.
the people who are fighting in this action. And I know that's what you meant. I just want to make sure people
Mm-hmm.
knew that, so
Absolutely.
people wouldn't think that you were implying that everybody's just sort of into this
Oh,
chaotic. But
no.
but what I really like about these protests is that we're kind of moving beyond the what I would call the bullshit notion of kind of having this this black person that's chosen by the power structure to go on television to ask people to remain calm, and like what really matters is that no matter what the verdict is, we want you to be calm, we want you to be peaceful. Well no, we don't want to hear all that. Talk about what the system needs to do. Don't talk about what the protesters need to do. I think they have a right to protest in the way that they would like to protest. And what I see is, I see a nice mixture between, peaceful protests and creating just enough chaos that it's going to hopefully inspire the powers that be to act on this, right? I loved when whoever came with the idea to shut down traffic on major intersections during rush hour. God
Mm-hmm.
bless them. I think it's great. Now I'm wondering how the police are going to come back and respond to this, but I like the idea of disrupting the lives of middle class Americans just enough that they're going to ask, okay, what's going on? Why are
Right.
people doing this?
Right.
Okay, make this stop. I have to get to work. I think that's a good thing, because it's not violent. You're not burning anything down. You're not killing anybody. You're not starting the revolution, but you're not sitting there just sort of doing the same things we've been doing for 50 years that, have had mixed results. I'll just say that. I won't say that, the civil rights movement wasn't impactful and wasn't powerful. It was, but it can certainly be critiqued, right? So I'm wondering, politically, I almost feel like President Obama has to do something. I just really feel like people, they're no longer in love with him, especially African Americans. The love affair is over. People are looking at you like, okay, what kind of man are you? Whose side are you on? I see a radicalization of the black collective, unlike anything we've seen in a long time. And what's interesting to me, and I'd love to get your take on this because I'm literally going on this stream of thought, and I'm going to try to keep it short because I get long winded. I don't want to do that. What I saw was when Obama got elected, here's what was interesting. I feel like this radicalization we see now actually started with the Obama presidency. Why? Because you had these black people who said, "We've made it. We have a black president."
Mm-hmm.
And then they saw the way this man was being treated in the White House. He's educated, he's hardworking, he's smart, he's responsible, he's a good father, a good human being, and yet he's still being treated like shit. You know, they're still telling him, you may be from Harvard, but you're still a nigga to us. And I hate keeping it real
Mm-hmm.
like that, but that's what it is.
Mm-hmm.
And I think what that did was I think, a further confirmation for the angry black middle class that racism is going to exist even when you behave in the way that you think that you're supposed to behave to be successful, right? Even if you engage in what I call the good Negro behavior protocol, you're still going to have to deal with racism, and racism is real. So I think it woke
Right.
some of those people up. I
Mm-hmm.
think they became angry by what they were watching, and I think they, in effect, maybe became more in tune with their black identity, more in touch with some of what happens in America as it pertains to race. But then, okay, so then you move forward, fast forward, say 5 years, and now you've got the situation in Ferguson. The Ferguson protests are most interesting to me because in this particular case, you're seeing people from all different socioeconomic backgrounds coming together to protest the death of
Mm-hmm.
Mike Brown. You saw a lot of brothers and sisters from the hood that normally might not get involved in political action, that were out there marching and fighting and stuff like that. You saw rappers bringing together their power.
Right.
I believe that black entertainers and athletes are the sleeping giant in our community. For so many years they've been able to distract them with low education, lots of little shiny trinkets and all these other things that meant absolutely nothing, but it was enough to keep them from engaging in any sort of meaningful progressive action. It kept them away from obtaining a sense of purpose, right? Because 10 years ago, the sense of purpose for many athletes and entertainers was to get a bigger house and a nicer car and prettier women and drugs, and alcohol and pop bottles at the club. Now you've got athletes like LeBron James and Derrick Rose and entertainers like Diddy who are saying we need to use our power to fight for a purpose. That really has not happened since the 60s, right?
Right.
So now what I see is from the very bottom to the very top, you see the entire African American community, and then some, those people who sympathize with what's going on, who are really in tune with all of this. Like, that guy Boyce Watkins at Your Black World is no longer the crazy radical Negro that we avoid. We're turning to this now because we're seeking something better than the existence that we've lived up until this point. That's what I think really should signal to Obama. America is changing. Black America is changing. They're going to evaluate you on a lot more substance than flash, and you need to deliver, or people are going to turn on you the way they've turned on Charles Barkley and all these other people that are doing things that don't make a lot of sense. Okay, that's my analysis on it. Please feel free to respond or retort to that. I'd love to hear what you think.
I don't think he cares. I don't think he cares what Black America thinks about him. Um, in my humble opinion, he has taken, and I when I speak of he, I'm speaking of a collective he. President Obama and those advisors that are closest to him, I don't believe that they give a damn about us, and I don't think they give a damn about what we think about.
So
They're
so
taking us for granted
I think
because his world, America, is changing, but the America that he actually has to answer to is doing quite well. Wall Street is doing great, and his benefactors are making money hand over fist. And so when he leaves the White House, he's not going to leave the White House and move into move over to the South Side of Chicago. I mean, into the hood. That's not going to happen. He and Arnie Duncan and the rest of the crew, they're going to do just fine.
yeah,
So
but what about? See, I I'm gonna disagree on that a little bit. Not because I don't know the answer to this.
I don't either.
But
That's just my
but
opinion.
but I'm gonna tell you, I when I look at Michelle Obama, Michelle Robinson, I look at Michelle Robinson too, not just Michelle Obama. I see a woman who is not going to sleep with a man every day who doesn't give a damn about the death of Eric Garner. I really believe that, and I think in terms of his some of his greatest
I
influences.
didn't say he doesn't care about the death of Eric Garner. I said he doesn't care. I said he doesn't give a damn about what we think about him.
I
That's
think I think he
that's what I said.
I think he cares a little bit, but you're right though. I think in terms of what the powers that move America, the powers that shape political decisions, we're not always in that group, right? Well, now we did vote him into office,
Right.
but outside of that, when it comes to big money and all that, we're not there. But I really think that President Obama, I've seen him say things and do things, on racial issues, make statements and things like that he really didn't have to make. He didn't have to say that if I had a son, he'd look like Trayvon, right? and,
Mm-hmm.
and every time I see him kind of act on that a little bit, I see that Michelle Obama influence on him, and I think, and not just the Michelle Obama influence, but also of this collective influence of the black community. Where
Okay.
he's being evaluated because to me, if he didn't care what black people thought about him, they wouldn't have done all the meaningless stuff that they've done over the years to try to endear him to black people. Like I think that they're aware that of how much black people love Michelle Obama. That's why they send her to certain venues. I think they're aware of just the love affair that people had with Obama for all those years, and I think that was why they did the superficial stuff. Now, and I would hope that same energy or that same influence that led them to do the superficial things will lead them to do the substantive things now that the community needs them. I don't think Obama's
Okay.
just going to walk away from this. And the other thing is, too,
Okay.
just being real, I really believe that Obama, as a person who has studied the Constitution and civil rights and who has lived on the south side of Chicago and who has, sat close to Jeremiah Wright, I just cannot imagine him seeing all of this, seeing this upheaval, unlike anything we've seen in 40 years. I can't imagine him watching all this and saying, I don't give a damn, I'm not going to do anything. I think he's going to do something. I really believe that. In fact,
Okay.
another piece of evidence I'll throw out there, and then I'm done. I'll let you get the last word, brother. Is the fact that he appointed Eric Holder as his attorney general says something too, because I know Eric Holder sees this, and I truly believe Eric Holder does give a damn. And the fact that Obama appointed him to me says through transitivity that he does at least give a damn to some point, or at least a little bit. So I'll let you get the
Okay.
last word, man. I didn't mean to keep pushing that issue like
No,
that.
no, 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 no. I think that's a valuable that's a valuable discussion. I think it's a valuable critique, and I hope I'm wrong, and I hope you're right, and time will tell. I can't hear you. So
Sorry about that.
there you go. There you go.
Okay, thanks. Speaking of time, I've had you on here for 39 minutes and 19
Okay.
seconds. And so I want to say thank you so much to the people who have been checking us out. And I apologize for that audio issue. that was all my fault. That's because I'm just bad with the technology. But you know that we're well intended, even when we do stupid things, or even when I do stupid things. Dr. Leon doesn't do stupid things at all. Well, thank you very much, man. Thank you very much, brother. I really
You
appreciate
got
your
it.
time.
Thank
Absolutely.
you.
And thank you all for checking us out at yourblackworld.com. I'm Dr. Boyce Watkins. This is Dr. Wilmer Leon. And until we meet again, please stay strong, be blessed, and be educated. We are gone. Peace.